Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad to be here with all of you tonight. Should be yet another great, epic conversation. Many things that we can discuss. I'm here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. It's just after 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, August 30th. So glad to be here with all of you. Let's do it.
American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Should be a great conversation here tonight. So glad to be here with all of you for yet another late night chat. We're talking about all kinds of important things. We have different speeds that we use here. Some nights I'm just kind of chilling and reacting to current events or reacting to some content by someone of a rival political perspective. Some nights I'm on here reminiscing about life and self-help and spiritual things. And other nights I'm just on here telling you what I believe and about my experiences in life. We have different speeds. That's what makes all of you great, is that you're along for the ride. It's not the same every night. It is not the same every night. That is one thing no one can accurately accuse me of. I do not repeat. Right? We have many different speeds. We have many different tones on this channel. I show many different sides of myself on these broadcasts, and I get to see different sides of you. And you all are part of this, right? If I didn't have the chat talking, if I didn't have people throwing questions at me the way I did, this wouldn't be the way it is, right? I could just stare at my camera and talk and post it afterwards, but it wouldn't be anything like this. This is a magical experience, an absolutely magical experience, what we do here. When I've had a bad day, I get on here and I talk to all of you, and it makes me happy. It really lights up my life to be able to come and chat with all of you every night, pretty much, as many nights as we possibly can. This is something special. We have a connection here, a deep, vibrant connection, and it's really, really special. And our community here is close knit. Our community here is not huge. We're not one of these huge internet streamer fandoms. We're a tight knit community of people, and we're the center for political innovation. And we love each other, and we care about each other, and we are on a mission together. And it's really dynamic and beautiful. So welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're right now on the Rumble, we're right now on the Rockfin, and we're right now on YouTube. And YouTube is suppressing us like crazy. I guarantee you I'm not offending 15 people every day. They are just unsubscribing people. And that's why we need to pivot to other platforms. I will stay on YouTube as long as I possibly can. I'm not going to give up my spot on this widely used platform, but they are heavily shadow banning and suppressing us. So if you're subscribed on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed. Maybe unsubscribe and resubscribe to make sure you get the notifications. Hit the notifications bell, hit the like button, and keep in mind that, we have to fight for every last subscriber, right? Other channels, they just blow up immediately and all kinds of people subscribe to them, but we have to fight for every last subscriber that we get. It is not easy to do what we do here. And every one of us is precious. Every one of us is precious. And we take this seriously, right? We're not putting on an outrageous freak show. I'm not wearing silly costumes. I'm not just trying to say the most outrageous thing to get attention. I'm trying to take this seriously because I think that we can actually win. I think we can actually win. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm in this. That's why I'm in this. And that means that we're not going to be able to hack it. It means we're not going to be able to be phony. It means we're going to have to speak about things in a responsible way rather than a silly, clownish way. We're going to have to be serious. That doesn't mean I can't get fired up from time to time. It doesn't mean I can't tell the occasional joke or sing you the occasional song, but on some level, we have to be serious. And that holds us back in an internet world that's performance art. You know, Peter Coffin made that great film recently, and people should check it out. But anyway, quickly, for those of you who may not be familiar, the way we do things on this channel is that I give my opening remarks. And while I give them, I do what I just did here with Alex F. I write down your super chat questions. So if there's something you want me to talk about, shoot me a super chat. Then after that, I do the roll call and we find out who it is, who's on the other side of the camera, who's watching. And then after that, I answer your questions for the rest of the night. You make the second half of the show happen. It is up to you how the second half of the show goes. So if you got something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show, send me a Rumble rant, send me a Rockfin tip, or send me a super chat on the YouTube, and I will add you to the list, and I will do my best to give you an answer. It may not be the answer that you want, but I think it'll be an answer that will teach you something. I will do my best to give you an answer. I will do my best to give you an answer. So just wanted to keep that in mind, everybody. Now, before we get started here, I got a number of announcements to make. The first announcement I just found out about literally just now. As I was starting this stream, I got the message from the great people at our tech team. On the Center for Political Innovation website, we now have a films page. Films, cpiusa.org/films. You can watch the films of the Center for Political Innovation on our website. It's great, right? We've got a link to Money in American Injustice, the great film we just did. We've got a link to the Summit Against Hypocrisy. We have our films section on our website. Great update and great work to the web team. I am so happy that that is there. We've got news. We've got conferences. You can watch the videos of our conference. We've got our library with different published works about Marxism and socialism. We got our books section. Now we have our films section, and we have a donate section. You can donate directly to the CPI Education Project. So our CPI website is a work in progress, but now you can check out the films section, which I think is a great addition to the site. I think that is tremendous that the films page is there. Shout out to the web team for doing that. That is really, really great. Another great announcement. I want to remind everybody that every single morning on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel, we have a morning message. Every morning. I just uploaded. It's set to air tomorrow morning. The 45th message from a CPI member. And we're doing one every single morning. We're going 45 days straight. We've had a message. We have not missed a day yet. And it's a really great activity that our community is doing. Every single morning, we have a morning message to help people start their day with revolutionary hope and optimism. It's a great thing. And we always need more morning messages. So if you're a member of the community or if you're a fan or whatever, if you want to make a video, send it my way, please do. We need more messages, right? It's a way that we keep people engaged. We give our members a platform to expand their voice, to put forward their perspective. It's a really, really great activity that we've been doing. And it's part of keeping people plugged in every single day to the Center for Political Innovation. It's really, really, really great. And it's something we're doing in the lead up to our national convention, which is happening in Portland, Oregon on December 2nd. I am so excited about it. It is going to be awesome. I've been talking with Elizabeth Young, our president out in Portland. We got a great It is going to be absolutely, absolutely tremendous, our national national gathering that's happening, our national convention out in Portland, Oregon. So you want to be there. Peter Coffin will be there. He's making a film about it. In addition to that, we're going to have international guests and friends, and it'll be a great day out in Portland. So I'm very excited. Make sure you tune in for the morning messages every day. And yet another announcement is we have a new Center for Political Innovation book that is now available. Letter to Bob Avakian. My book, Letter to Bob Avakian. It's now available and it's selling. People are buying it. Got on there today. Was kind of impressed with the number that is sold. People are buying Letter to Bob Avakian. This is a new book that we've published. It's a polemic, but also an assessment and an overview of the role played by the leader of a small American communist group, one of the most visible communist organizations in America, the Revolutionary Communist Party. And it is my assessment of his work, his life and career, etc. And everyone who's read it so far loves it. It surprises people. It is not what people were expecting. And thank you, Austin. I do appreciate it. Much appreciated. It is not what people are expecting. It's not what people thought it would be. It comes at Bob from many different angles. So, I want to recommend that people read it and check it out. And I also want to say that I'm trying to do as many interviews about it as I possibly can. I've got a few lined up already. But, we're trying to do as many of them as we possibly can. So if you want to read the book, you can go and order it right there. Just order the book right there. And I'm available for interviews about it. If you've got a small YouTube channel, doesn't matter. I will do an interview with you about it. I want to do as many interviews about this book as possible because my goal is for everybody who comes across Bob Avakian and the Revolutionary Communist Party to come across the Center for Political Innovation and to hear our side of the story, our critique and assessment of the role that they have played. And our critique, this is not a hit piece. I mean, there are two pretty big bombshells in the piece. Two pretty big revelations. But in addition to that, it is an overall critique and assessment of their worldview, and I hope that people will read it. And I think it'll have a long shelf life. I think that as long as people are out there promoting there's going to be people that'll research this and dig into it and want to hear our side of the story. So I encourage people to pick up a copy. If you got a small YouTube channel, you want to have me on there to talk about it, I'll even send you a PDF of the book for free, and maybe even a print copy as well in exchange for you having me on your YouTube channel to talk about it. And I'll even do it if you have a small YouTube channel. It doesn't have to be a huge channel. We're just trying to get as much knowledge of this book out there as we possibly can. So that book, that's our new book project. It went live yesterday, and it's already gotten a great response. I am scheduled to talk about it with the great Jeff Young of Kentucky. He and I are going to have a chat about it very soon. And thank you, Victory Jen. I do appreciate that. And in addition to that, I'm scheduled to talk about it with the great Peter Coffin. We are scheduled to have a chat about it as well. I've got 2 lined up. Now, I've got a couple other interviews scheduled for the book as well. And yeah, we just want to make this a conversation, right? Now is the time. We're talking about building an in real life revolutionary organization. So what could be more important than assessing the role of somebody who's been doing that in the United States for the last 50 years? So there you go. Just wanted to let you all know about that project. So there you go. There you go, everybody. Those are our announcements for tonight. And I see people are watching. People are here in the YouTube. People are here in the Rumble. People are here on the Rockfin. And we appreciate all of you and all the support that you're offering. And I'm going to jump now into my opening remarks. So let's talk. Why are you listening right now? Why are you listening to me? Why? Ask yourself that question. It's a fair question, right? I have a feeling you're not listening because you're required to. You're not chained to a chair someplace, forced to listen to this. I assume you're not listening because you finally find me greatly attractive. I'm not exactly a muscle-bound man. I don't think you're here for the sex appeal. I don't think you're here because you're hoping that I'll help you get answers correct on your math homework. I don't think you're here. You're here because you think I'm a great musician or something like that. You're here for a reason. You're listening to me talk for a reason. And I spend a lot of time thinking about that. Why is it that people listen to me? And what is it that I have to offer those who do listen to me? What should I make a point of doing? And what should I make a point of not doing? What should I focus on? And what should I avoid? I think a lot about Vladimir Lenin's book, What Is to Be Done. Do people know about this book? 1903. In Russia, there was a widespread revolutionary movement. There was a Marxist party called the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. It was led by Plekhanov, but it was a very open group. Many different Russians were involved in supporting strikes and protests by labor unions and studying Marxist books. And Vladimir Lenin was a well-respected figure within the Russian intelligentsia. But he took his job much more seriously than many of the other so-called Marxists and revolutionaries in Russia at that time did. He took his job much more seriously, and he looked at the RSDLP, the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, and he said, this ain't going to work. This is not going to work. And so he wrote a book called What Is to Be Done, proposing a new type of political party for Russia. He called it a party of new type. A party of new type. He believed that this party of new type could actually win. And the book that he wrote, What Is to Be Done, is very difficult to read because it is full of obscure references. It refers to newspapers with Russian names that were around hundreds of years ago. Raboche Deleo. I'm probably butchering that if there's anyone who speaks Russian who's listening. Raboche Deleo and Iskra and all kinds of newspapers. He refers to all kinds of Russian names of people that no one's talking about these days. But this book, What Is to Be Done? It's an important book, not because it's easy to read, not because it's a great work of literature and it's poetic. It's an important book because it was a book that argued this is what we need to do if we're going to win. Then in that book, Lenin laid out a vision for building a revolutionary organization that could actually take power. And one of the things he critiques in the book, What Is to Be Done, is what he calls tailism, or bowing to spontaneity, or economism, which was what was widely practiced by those who called themselves Marxists in Russia at that time. There would be a strike or a protest or a demonstration among the working class. And those so-called communists would run towards it and say they supported it. Something was already happening. People were already feeling a certain way. And so those who called themselves communists would run after it. They would tail after it. Bowing to spontaneity. The spontaneous feelings are already there. And so they follow the spontaneous feelings. They tail after it. The dog follows behind, the tail follows behind the dog. And so like the dog, they are the tail on the dog. They follow behind it. Economism. And at one point in What Is to Be Done, there's a dialogue between a working class person and a so-called Marxist. And the Marxist says to the worker, "Oh, we support you. You're oppressed by the capitalists." And the worker says, "Tell me something I don't know." And that's what Lenin was arguing, that simply engaging in tailism, following after feelings that are already there in society, bowing to spontaneity was not going to work. That instead of bowing to spontaneity, the Bolsheviks should position themselves to be the leaders of the masses, tribunes of the people, rather than trade union secretaries. And that in order to do so, he argues they need to build a party of new type that engages in agitation, stirring up the masses for a greater confrontation, and propaganda, finding the most revolutionary and advanced people and teaching them the complex ideology of Marxism. Agitation for the masses, propaganda to the advanced. Democratic centralism, meaning that those in the organization widely discuss and debate, but once they reach a decision, every member is obligated to carry it out, whether they agree or not. And in addition to that, they keep their fighting and their debate internal. So they have one unified face to the masses. That's democratic centralism. That's the party of new type. That's agitation propaganda. And it was a big deal that Lenin wrote about this in his book, What Is to Be Done. It's a pretty big deal that Lenin wrote about this. Not because what he wrote was just a good piece of content. People consumed it and they liked it, but because people put it into practice and it worked. The Bolsheviks took power. They created the Soviet Union. They raised millions of people out of poverty. They invented space travel. They defeated Adolf Hitler. They had huge achievements that all of humanity is in awe of. And that is why the book, What Is to Be Done, matters. Got it up here on my shelf, actually. What Is to Be Done? International Publishers Edition. It's not an easy book to get through. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got about the book, What Is to Be Done, was to read it backwards. Read the chapters in backwards order. Read the chapters in backwards order. It's much easier to comprehend. Read the plan for the All-Russian Political Newspaper and then the primitiveness of economists and the organization of revolution, and then the trade unionist politics and social democratic politics, and then the spontaneity of the masses and the consciousness of social democrats, and then end with chapter 1, the dogmatism and freedom of criticism. That's some very good advice. Read the chapters in backwards order. It's a difficult book to get through, but the book matters because Vladimir Lenin was explaining how to build the type of revolutionary organization that was needed in his time and that was successful. And as the Bible says, you shall know them by their fruits. The results are everywhere to be seen. The Bolsheviks and Marxist-Leninists in general created socialist revolutions that changed the course of human history. The results are there to be seen. But that particular section that talks about tell me something I don't know, don't engage in tailism, that's very important because I'm not on here to tell you what you already know. I'm here to tell you what you don't know. I'm here to offer my contribution. I am here to tell you what you don't know. I'm here to tell you what could help you understand things. That's what I'm here to do. I am here to give you an analysis and an understanding that is widely missing in our time. Someone once said to me, if you don't know something, don't say it. But if you do know something and you know it to be true and you are absolutely sure that it's true, then scream it from the heavens. And I'm on here night after night after night to tell you what I know to be true. I'll tell you what I know to be true is that we live under a system where production is organized for profit. We don't have schools so kids can get an education. We have schools to train kids to be good workers for the capitalists and manage children for society. We don't have food so people can eat it. We have food so big agribusiness and big box stores can make money off of it. We don't have housing so people can have a place to live. We have housing so that landlords and banks and corporations can make profits off of it. That's why we have this problem of real estate speculation, and the rent is so damn high in the urban centers, even though people can't afford to live there. We have a system where production is organized for profit, not for social use. And that system has a built-in flaw, which is that the worker is never paid enough to buy back what he produces. The amount of wages paid out in the process of creating this pen are never enough to buy back this pen. There's always more goods produced than there are wages paid out. And that this problem constantly hangs over the capitalist system. The worker cannot afford to buy back what he produces, but great technological leaps in capitalism that make production more efficient than ever before, that reduce the role of the worker at the assembly line. Great technological advances that should be a moment of celebration for the human race, that should lead to a more prosperous and comfortable life for all. Under capitalism, lead to prolonged periods of economic crisis and instability. Self-driving cars should be a wonderful thing. But if self-driving cars came into being in America, there would be riots in the streets. There would be millions of truck drivers and Uber drivers and taxi drivers and traffic court employees, and all kinds of people would be out of a job. That's not rational. Under capitalism, a great technological leap in the means of production which should lead to us becoming wealthier as a society, naturally leads to a prolonged economic crisis. World War I came as the result of many leaps and advances in technology and many financial meltdowns and panics. World War II came as the result of the Great Depression. And the Great Depression was the result of Henry Ford and the great advances in assembly line production during the roaring 20s, Taylorism, etc. And that what we are living in now is the greatest leap in technology that we've seen in a very long time, the computer revolution. Artificial intelligence, automation on a scale we have never seen before. And in a rational society, this would be a reason to celebrate. It would lead to a more prosperous and happy life for all. But because production is organized for profit, because we live in a society where the banks and the factories and the industries are organized for the profits of private owners, of a wealthy few, because of that, we are headed for a prolonged economic crisis. And what I do know is that the way out of this economic crisis is for the banks and the factories and the means of production and the centers of economic power, these great machines, these great industries, these great oil wells, these great banks, these great centers of economic power, to be organized in the interest of all society. Production for profit must be abolished. And instead, the means of production should be forced to operate on a rational central plan, so that growth is no longer restrained by the irrationality and chaos of the market. The anarchy of production is abolished, and instead, all the concentrated power of human reason and human creativity can be rationally channeled, and we can build a society with so much wealth and so much prosperity that the very need for a state and for government can fade away. That we seek to strive to create a society that is so wealthy and so abundant and so prosperous that coercion can be abolished, that exploitation and social hierarchies of any kind can be abolished. The very need for a government can fade away. We can have a society where people just do what they feel like doing and take what they need from each according to his own ability, to each according to his needs. But the road to doing so means changing the nature of our economy. An economy based on profit leads to a situation where people are homeless because there are too many houses, where people are hungry because there is too much food. It leads to a situation where poverty is created by abundance, and this must be abolished. And that a big chunk of the world has already broken out of that system. China is not in the system of production for profit. They have a centrally planned economy, and that's why they are not being held back by the computer revolution. That's why their economy is speeding ahead while ours creaks and moans. I don't know if you saw this, but the first train to go from Russia to Iran to Saudi Arabia just rolled through today. I don't know if you saw this. This is history in the making. A train went from Moscow in Russia down through Central Asia to Iran, to the Islamic Republic of Iran, and then from there to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. There's a new world arising. And we in the United States are not part of it. Not because we wouldn't make money being part of it. We would make a lot of money if we were part of it. We would make a lot of money if we were part of it. But our leaders have locked us out of it. Because America is not ruled by the American people. America is ruled by a financial oligarchy. America is ruled by a group of bankers and billionaires, members of an internationalist financial ruling elite who do not see the new economy that is emerging, centered around Russia and China, and in places like Vietnam and Iran and Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the BRICS. They don't see that as an exciting opportunity for the human race. They don't see that as an exciting moment for humanity to speed forward. Rather, they see this as a dangerous threat to their power. It's a game of king of the mountain. They're at the top of the hill. They're at the top of the hill, and they're announcing game over. Because if this game continues, someone's going to knock me off the top. We can't have that. The only way they can stay on top is to keep the world poor and make it even poorer. And that is what they are determined to do. And they'll do it in the name of climate change, and they'll do it in the name of the war on terror, and they'll do it in the name of human rights, and they'll do it in the name of LGBT, and they'll do it in the name of whatever the hell they make up. They are determined to stop the train of history from speeding forward. They do not want to see the new world that is arising in Eurasia. They do not want to see the new Silk Road. They don't want to see the One Belt, One Road initiative. They do not want to see the World Land Bridge be created. They do not want to see the BRICS. They do not want to see the Bolivarian alternative for Latin America. They don't want to see the axis of resistance in the Middle East. They do not want to see prosperity beyond the so-called golden billion. They don't want to see that. They want to stay at the top. And that in our time, many things have changed their nature. Many things in American politics are not what they were before. Patriotism, for example. Patriotism used to make me sick because patriotism was an excuse to be stupid. When I was in high school, I was criticized the war in Iraq. People would say to me, "Shut up. Why are you disrespecting our country?" And I would say, well, I'm not disrespecting our country. I'm saying that we shouldn't be invading a sovereign country of Iraq. Well, I think America's a good country. Why don't you just move to some other country if you don't like it here? I would say I think that we ought to have national health care to make sure people have medical care when they're sick. And they'd say, well, if you think that, why don't you go move to another country? I mean, if you don't like the way we do things here, you should move somewhere else. That's un-American. That's un-American. Patriotism used to be people's excuse to be stupid. It was jingoism. It was an excuse to support the wars around the world. It was an excuse to support government repression of black revolutionary activists and leftist movements. But now, the ruling elite has changed their tone. Now their message is suddenly that, yeah, America is a racist country. America is a bad country. And we deserve to be poorer. And if you're from a red state, if you're from Oklahoma or Kentucky or Mississippi, and you're singing about rich men north of Richmond, you're saying you want jobs and life to get better, that makes you a big fat racist. So we're going to cancel you on social media. If you say you love your country, that means you're a bad person, because America is racist. And that's why everyone here in America needs to be poorer. You know, this middle class that we cultivated, this layer of well-paid white industrial workers that we cultivated to hold U.S. society to be stable, we don't need them anymore. We don't need them in the steel mills. We don't need them in the auto plants. And on top of that, we don't feel like paying them what we used to. So you know what? Yeah, in order to justify austerity and the driving down of the low-wage police state, instead of whipping up this stupid patriotism, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to drill into everybody's head that, yep, anybody who wants economic justice, anyone who wants to see the country get better economically, they're a big racist. They're a big racist. Because of that, we're gonna cancel them on social media. And you know what? You just have to support austerity. You have to support austerity. And anyone from a Rust Belt state who talks about the opioid epidemic or talks about the economic suffering that people face, well, what that is, that's a white supremacist dog whistle. And so they're just mad that they're losing their white privilege, and they deserve to be poorer. They deserve to be poorer. That's what we're going to do. And if you talk about economic justice, if you talk about, wanting the jobs for working people, we're going to call you a class reductionist. We're going to call you a white supremacist, and we're going to cancel you. That's what the ruling class is now saying. It used to be they built up a layer of right-wing working class people. That's long gone. Trumpism proves that Americans are still capable of a mass movement. I see that, Jamie, and you're on the list. You're on the list. Now things have changed. It used to be, and I remember this very well, that in the name of fighting drug addiction, they set up a police state in this country. They threw millions of black people in jail, millions of people who had a drug problem, who should have gotten medical treatment, instead got to go to jail and be traumatized and have horrible experiences and continue using drugs and come out of jail criminalized for life using drugs. It used to be that in school, I remember this, where the police officer lit something that smelled like marijuana and told us to report our parents and report our brothers and sisters to the police if we smelled it. They whipped up a drug hysteria to justify their police state. And it didn't solve the drug problem at all. The drug problem got worse, but they used it to create a system of prisons for profit. They used it to whip up racism against black people with rhetoric about super predators and gang experts who would testify before juries. And it was awful what they did. And Kamala Harris rose up the ranks as a California prosecutor doing this. And so did Amy Klobuchar, and so did Joe Biden, and so did the Clintons. And it was a really sinister thing that they did with their war on drugs. It was evil. But now they've flipped it on us. Now, all of a sudden, marijuana is being legalized everywhere. All of a sudden, they're pushing mental health professionals to prescribe people hallucinogens. And many young Americans are angry about the fact that they don't have a job. They're angry about the fact that they don't have decent opportunities in their communities. They're struggling. They're upset. And so they're handing them out drugs. Here, have some marijuana. Have some hallucinogens. No. It's not a problem with our society. You've just got trauma. You've got a mental health problem. Here, why don't you go trip on some magic mushrooms? Why don't you have some magic mushrooms? Why don't you have some marijuana? Why don't you have some marijuana? Why don't you have some drugs? Why don't you get stoned? Why don't you fry your brain here? Chill out. Why don't we just incapacitate you? And it's not just recreational drugs. No, if a kid's misbehaving in school, what do? They prescribe him some Ritalin. They prescribe him some Risperidone. They prescribe him some drugs, and he overeats and he gets fatter, and he has long-term life effects, and they give him some drugs. And on top of that, they've got fentanyl and opioids flooding the country. And now all of a sudden, yes, for a while, the policy was to whip up drug hysteria, scare everybody, and use that to set up a racist prison state. And that worked for a while. Then they flipped it. Now the policy is to get us all stoned. Now the policy is to get us all to fry our brains, to get us all to be stoned out of our minds so that they can control us. It's not just drugs. It's pornography. Any distraction they can pump out to us, now they do that. Things have changed. There's been a flip. I'm opposed to the outlawing of drugs. I'm opposed to drug criminalization, but I'm not in favor of using drugs either. Doesn't have a good effect on people. I've seen what it does to people in communities, and a lot of things have changed. Yeah, can't forget the hormone blockers, can we? A lot of things have changed. It used to be that the way they justified their imperialist system was with religion. They told us, I remember I was sitting in science class. My 8th grade science teacher explained to us that 9/11 happened, he said, because in the Muslim world, they don't believe in the 10 Commandments, which is outrageous. Muslims do believe in the 10 Commandments, but they don't believe in the 10 Commandments. They don't read, thou shalt not kill, and that's why 9/11 happened. Those Muslims don't have Jesus. They don't have the Bible, right? When the USA invaded Iraq, General Boykin, one of the top Pentagon generals, he said, our God is stronger than their God, to justify the war. That it used to be that a big part of the way the U.S. imperialist state operated was in the name of religion. In the name of the Bible, in the name of religion, they justified their wars. And they said that you've got to obey authority and you've got to be patriotic and obedient because of Christianity, and that that the military and U.S. imperialist wars and anti-communism and all of that was centered around God and the Bible and the flag. That's how it used to be. But now, things have changed. Now, they tell us that if you believe right and wrong exists, you must be in a cult. If you think that actual truth exists in this world, there's something worth sacrificing for, you must be a sucker. Because their system and their belief that might makes right and compassion is weakness leads to the superior ones rising to the top. And the billionaires and the rich people are there because they're just naturally the best. They have the better, superior genes. And the rest of us, we have to suffer and see our living standards go down and see our neighborhoods destroyed by opioids and see the roads falling down. We're just genetically inferior. We're just the genetic inferiors. And if you believe that we have rights and that we should be taken care of, oh, you're a sucker. You're a Boy Scout. You're a fool. No one believes in that morality stuff no more. No, the weak get suppressed and the strong ride over them. And compassion is for suckers and compassion is for fools. And what's so dangerous about all this stuff, about all this religion stuff and this belief in God, is that it gets in the way. It gets in the way of a free and open society. And that's why you got to support Israel against the Palestinians, because those Palestinians are a bunch of Muslims who believe in the Quran and they believe in right and wrong. But Israel is a modern, democratic, liberal society. Got to support Israel against them. And that's why we got to put sanctions on Iran, because those Iranians, they have a Bible and a moral code they live by, and they don't understand that might makes right, and that right and wrong is a totalitarian cult invented by people that want to brainwash and control you, and that actually it's all just about money and greed and selfish individualism. That's their mindset, right? It used to be that they justified their system with religion. Now they justify their system with liberalism. Used to be they justified their criminal, police state with the war on drugs. Now they're handing drugs out like candy. Used to be that they justified their wars and their authoritarianism with patriotism. Now they want to wipe out any pride and any sense of collective identity, any belief in right and wrong, because it could be used to demand things like jobs and healthcare and education. They've flipped the script on us in many, many ways. They've flipped the script. Their position on patriotism is flipped. Their position on drugs is flipped. Their position on religion is flipped. But the overall story has not changed. The world is still ruled by a sinister financial oligarchy that says money comes first, that says right and wrong don't exist. There's still a block of countries that is resisting their domination, and that block of countries has only grown stronger. The American working class is still watching its living standards go down. That hasn't changed. Profits and the rule of profits is still unsustainable, and that has not changed as well. The overall story is the same, but the role of individual characters has flipped. Religion used to be their friend and our enemy. Now religion is our friend and their enemy. Patriotism used to be their friend and our enemy. Now patriotism is our friend and their enemy. Drugs used to be something they used to justify their police state. Now drugs are something they find convenient for brainwashing the population and controlling them. But the overall story has not changed. The overall story has not changed. Capitalism and its global imperialist financial stage is still headed for collapse and disaster. The working class of the world is still fighting back. Russia, China, Venezuela, Iran, Cuba, so many countries have broken out of it, and they are still rising. Some of the characters, some of the chess pieces are different. But the overall story is the same. Socialism. Used to be that socialism was a dirty word. If you got up and you said you believed in socialism, people would look at you like you were a lunatic. They'd say, we don't have that here. That's a crazy thing. We don't believe in, nobody in America believes in socialism. Been told many times by libertarians, by others, you must be retarded if you believe in socialism, because everybody knows socialism is dumb and idiotic. It used to be nobody ever talked about socialism. Socialism was a forbidden topic. Socialism was just something that in America, people had no idea that in Britain, the Labour Party considered itself and declared itself falsely to be a socialist party, that the French government was full of socialists, that nobody knew any of that. Socialism was a dirty word in America. And if you knew anything about socialism, or if you were at all critical of capitalism, why you were on the fringe of U.S. society, and people looked at you like you were a weirdo, because everybody knew that capitalism was the best and socialism was a crazy thing. That's the way it used to be. But now things have changed. Things have changed. Now, suddenly, socialism is widely discussed in America. But socialism means we want everyone to be poor. Socialism has been co-opted and redefined to mean degrowth. The problem with capitalism isn't that it keeps people in poverty, that it holds back human creativity. No, that we're told the problem with capitalism is it wants more and more and more. It wants to expand. We can't have that. We can't have growth, so we need degrowth. Socialism means less and less and less. We're told by a crew of sinister people, socialism means abolishing billionaires. Socialism means everyone being poorer and poorer and poorer because socialism is inherently anti-wealth, that wealth is bad. That's what we're told that socialism means. And socialism is about trying to save Mother Earth by reducing consumption, reducing the population, making everyone poorer. That's not what socialism is. Read the Critique of the Goethe Program by Karl Marx. Look at what has happened in every communist and socialist country in the world. The Soviet Union didn't get poorer under Stalin. It raised millions of people up out of poverty. It built the world's largest hydroelectric power plants, the world's largest steel mills. It raised people up. It invented space travel. The Soviet Union did not get poorer. Degrowth did not happen in the Soviet Union. Look at China. Has China gotten richer or poorer since 1949? Well, the answer is richer by a lot. China did not get poorer. Libya, under the leadership of Gaddafi, did they get poorer? No, they did not get poorer. Under the leadership of Gaddafi, Libya raised its people up. It built the greatest, largest irrigation system in the world, wiped out illiteracy, had the highest life expectancy on the African continent. Socialism is not and has never been about making people poorer. That has nothing to do with socialism. But now we've got a new brand of socialism brought to you by the Ford Foundation, a new brand of socialism brought to you by ExxonMobil and BP, Shell, and Chevron, a new brand of socialism brought to you by Harvard University and George Soros. And this new brand of socialism says poverty is beautiful, just like Mother Teresa. Poverty is beautiful and growth is bad. It's weird. Right-wingers used to always say to those of us who believe in socialism, oh, you want to make everyone equally poor. And now a group of idiots bought and paid for by Wall Street have been rolled out to say, yes, sir, we do. Yes, sir, we do. Again, the story hasn't changed. The story hasn't changed. But the characters have changed roles. Socialism used to be a fringe dissident movement. Now socialism is a term that has been hijacked by sinister maniacal forces used by the ultra-rich to try and stabilize their system. Socialism is still about growth. Socialism is still about prosperity. Socialism is still about raising people up. But there's a new group of fascists who call themselves socialists that are being promoted by the richest of the rich in order to push their agenda of degrowth. The story is absolutely the same. The story is absolutely the same. Nothing has changed in the overall story. I still advocate the same thing. When I was 19 years old, I opposed U.S. military interventions around the world. I still oppose U.S. military interventions around the world. When I was 19 years old, I said that the United States has no right to invade Iraq, and I still say that the USA has no right to invade Iraq. When I was 19 years old, I believed that the banks and the factories and the industries of this country should be organized to serve the people and not the profits of a wealthy few. I still believe that the banks and the factories and the industries of this country should be organized to serve the people and not the property of a wealthy few. When I was 19 years old, I believed that one day the working people of this country would join arm in arm with the people of the world and break this country out of their financial system. I still believe that the working people of this country will stand arm in arm with the people of the world and break out of this financial system. When I was 19 years old, I believed that Stalin was a great hero for breaking Russia out of the domination of Western capitalism and raising millions of people from poverty. I still believe that Joseph Stalin is a great hero for breaking Russia out of Western capitalism and raising people up from poverty. When I was 19 years old, I believed that Mao Zedong was a great leader because he set the Chinese people free to build up their own country. I still believe that Mao Zedong is a great leader who broke the Chinese people free so they could develop their own country. When I was 19 years old, I believed that Che Guevara and Fidel Castro were great people because they enabled Cuba to break itself free, build up its healthcare system, raise its people up. I still believe that. I have not changed. I haven't changed. You've changed. You've changed. You've changed. I have not changed. I am beating the same drum that I've always beaten. I am tooting the same horn that I've always tooted. I'm standing for the same principles that I gave myself to decades ago, and I have not surrendered an inch. I haven't surrendered an inch. I haven't surrendered a centimeter. I have not surrendered and backed down on anything. When I was 19 years old, I said I wanted peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. I still want peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. When I was 19 years old, I said that Ayn Rand and her philosophy of greed is good and might makes right was satanic. I still believe that Ayn Rand and her philosophy is satanic. When I was 19 years old, I believed that the FBI was a criminal organization that murdered Black Panthers, that suppressed progressive movements. I still believe that the FBI is a criminal organization that suppressed Black Panthers and suppressed revolutionary progressive movements. When I was 19 years old, I believed that the CIA was a criminal organization that had overthrown democratic and progressive governments around the world. And I still believe that the CIA is a criminal organization that has overthrown progressive and democratic governments around the world. When I was 19 years old, I believed that John F. Kennedy had been murdered by this government because he wouldn't go along with their low-wage criminal war plans. I still believe that John F. Kennedy was murdered by this government because he wouldn't go along with their war plans. When I was 19 years old, I believed that all of the mainstream media was owned lock, stock, and barrel by the war makers, by the Pentagon, by the criminal corporations that are trying to march us into war. I still believe that our mainstream media is run by the criminal corporations that are trying to march us lock, stock, and barrel into war. I have not changed. I have not changed. You've changed. You've changed. You have changed. I have not changed. You so-called socialists used to hate the FBI. Now you support the FBI because the FBI is going after Donald Trump. You socialists and you communists used to protest the wars. Now you support the wars because they're justified in the name of LGBT rights and transgender bathrooms. You socialists used to support the working class and march the picket lines with them. Now you condemn Oliver Anthony because he dares sing a song that isn't up to your politically correct standards. You socialists and you communists, you used to be championing working class people and their justice. Now you demonize working class people and want them to be poorer because you want to save Mother Earth. I haven't changed. You've changed. You've changed. You've abandoned your principles. You've sold out. You've abandoned your truth. And I am right where I have always been. I am right standing on the truth that I've always given myself true. You've changed. You've sold out. You've marched in lockstep. You have drunk the wine of the whore of Babylon. You have sucked the teat of your oppressor. You have made yourself a voice for empire. You've made yourself a voice for imperialism with woke characteristics. You've changed. You've sold out. And I am right where I have always been. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I haven't become right-wing. I haven't become left-wing. I am right where I've always stood, on the foundations of anti-imperialism, on the foundations of working class struggle and justice, on the foundations of right and wrong and morality. I am right where I have always been. And I will not surrender on this point. I will not back down. I will not surrender. I will not bow and kiss the ring of dark forces. I'm right where I have always been. We might have a lot more flags than we used to have. There might be a lot more Bibles than there used to be. There might be a lot more polemicizing against other socialist groups than there used to be. But I'm still where I've always been. I am still where I've always been. I am still standing on the principles that I've always stood on. What's changed is that I understand them with a far higher level of depth. I understand the truths that I embraced with much more depth than I once did. And I understand the person that I am much more than I once did. I understand the irrationality of capitalism and the relationship of capitalism to technology. I understand that imperialism is about holding back development and growth. It's not about plundering resources. It's not like pirates. It took me a while to learn that. Somebody had to teach this to me. I understand socialist and communist governments because I've been there. Been to Venezuela, been to Nicaragua, been to Iran, been to Russia. Met people from the Donetsk People's Republic, Lugansk People's Republic, been to Crimea. Been to global communist gatherings. I understand it now more than I used to. And I understand that some of the way I used to understand it was rooted in my own infantilism, and my own immaturity. I realize now that perhaps the reasons I was attracted to all of this are not the reasons that other people will be attracted to all of this. I realize now that some of the snap judgments I made in my youth, some of the things I thought I knew when I was younger, I don't know. I realize now that some of the things I've done in the past maybe were not wise. I realize now that there are better ways to do things. And that's fine. Nothing wrong with getting a deeper understanding. Nothing wrong with having a deeper and wider understanding. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with being honest with yourself. Nothing wrong with examining your true motivations. Nothing wrong with asking yourself questions. We should all be doing that. We should all be doing that. A lot of things have changed, but the overall story has stayed the same. The mission has stayed the same. When I marched through the streets of Cleveland protesting the war in Iraq, I wanted the American people to realize that the Iraqi people weren't their enemy. ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron, and the Pentagon and Wall Street were their enemy. When I marched through the streets of New York City during Occupy Wall Street, protesting the bombing of Libya, I wanted the people at Occupy Wall Street and the people in New York City to realize that their real enemy wasn't Gaddafi. It was the imperialist monopolies that dominate the world. The monopolistic corporations, the big banks, the prison and industrial complex, the military industrial complex. That's what I was trying to do. And as I march through the streets of New York City, I have the same message. I'm for the working class. And I want the working class of this country to stand arm in arm with the people of the world. Long live the great unity of the people of the world. Long live the great unity of the people of the world. Long live the great unity of the people of the world. My message hasn't changed. My message hasn't changed. I haven't changed. Dialectical materialism as a philosophy says there is nothing permanent in the universe. That A does not equal A. You never step into the same river twice. That first A can never be equal to that second A because all things are constantly changing. That nothing is permanent, that the only thing constant is change. And when speaking about the material world, this is correct. All things decay. All things fade away. All that is solid melts into air. That's all true. But the only reason I'm still here, after all that I've faced, after all I've been subjected to, after all the people who've betrayed me, all the friends who've turned against me, after all the lies and smears that have been told about me, after all the hardship I've endured over these years, the only thing that keeps me going, the only thing that enables me to continue attaching to people and holding my hand out to a world that seems so uninterested in taking it, the only thing that keeps me going is that I have come to recognize and acknowledge that beyond this material world, there is something else. There is something beyond our material world. There is power. There is truth. There is something beyond the material existence. And that doesn't fit with the classical Marxist worldview. That doesn't fit with Karl Marx and dialectical materialism. Doesn't fit. But I would maintain that Marxism is the strongest argument for this that has ever existed. The history of our movement. What made Che Guevara give up his comfortable life as a wealthy Argentine to become a revolutionary who fought in the jungles and died in Bolivia for the people? What gave him the power to do something so moral, something so selfless? What was it that inspired millions of Chinese young people who lived privileged lives in the cities to pack up everything and go to the countryside to join the Red Army? What is it that inspired Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to get beaten up arrested over and over and over again, thrown in jail, lied about, smeared in the media, punched, spit on, attacked, ultimately killed. What was it? What was it? What was it? Whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, there is a God. But that God is not the God we've been told about. It's not a God who sits on a throne and has absolute power over absolutely everything and chooses to allow suffering to remain as a way to test us and cynically sits on a throne watching us suffer. No. No, it's not a God who has absolute power to end all the suffering in this world, but chooses not to because he wants to see if we're going to be loyal to him or not, wants to see if we're loyal, if we're obedient, and wants to send us to heaven or hell based on how we pass the test. No. That God doesn't exist. That God doesn't exist. And this world is not ruled by God. God does not rule this world. You go ask the people of Yemen if God rules this world. You go ask the people who've had their homes destroyed by bombs if God rules this world. You go ask the people who've spent their lives in prison or had their lives destroyed by opioids and drugs. You ask them if God rules this world. God doesn't rule this world. This world is run by Satan. This world is run by the devil. This world is run by the forces of evil. And if this was God's world, things would be very different. This world is run by the forces of evil. This world is run by the forces of darkness. This world is run by the forces of selfishness and greed and individualism and hate. The forces of backwardness and destructivism. This is their world. But we can conquer this world for God. We can be God's soldiers on this earth, battling against the forces of evil. We, as those of us who find love in our hearts and find a connection to something deeper and bigger than ourselves, and refuse to surrender and refuse to join the mob and refuse to back down, we who have a connection to something bigger than ourselves, we can win this world for God. We can win this world for the truth. We can win this world for the forces of justice and light. And we absolutely can't do it on our own. We absolutely can't do it as individuals. Because when a group of people are gathered, there's a room full of people who believe in justice and believe in truth, the energy that builds. It's like compare a drop of water to a huge, gigantic waterfall, to an ocean. And those of us who are filled with passion and truth assemble and combine and connect to one another, the spiritual power expands like you wouldn't believe. The spiritual power that exists becomes dramatic and powerful. There's a reason that Jesus Christ told his followers, when two or more are gathered in my name, I am there with them. And when we're together, when we're chanting the same words together, when we're marching in unison, marching in lockstep, when we're combining our strengths, when we're surrendering this so-called sacred individuality and making ourselves part of a group, a block, unifying with other people around truth, when we do that, the spiritual power that exists becomes so strong that it can completely move mountains. It can shake oceans. It can shake seas. There is something amazing about the combined power of people who believe in truth and justice. There's something amazing about the combined power of people who want to stand together and work for truth in this world. I've told people many, many times, the first time I ever met a North Korean was in Quito, Ecuador. I was at the World Festival of Youth and Students 2013. I was in the airport. Never had I ever been to a communist gathering, international communist gathering. Last minute decision, found out I was going a couple days beforehand. I happened to have a passport and got on a plane to Ecuador, got off the plane with a few comrades. And they're taking us all to different parts of the airport where people are gathering, and it's communists from all over the world. T-shirts and newspapers. We're all sitting in the airport, communists from Italy and Greece, communists from Africa, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and so many different countries, communists from Sri Lanka and India. And somebody whispers, that's the plane from North Korea that just landed. That's the plane from North Korea that just landed. So the whole crowd of young communists huddled in this section of the airport, this special section of the Quito airport, we all go quiet. There's whispering. The whole airport gets quiet. And then the doors fly open. Boom. They march in. And the men are wearing suits and ties. And the women are wearing traditional Korean gowns. And they're walking in perfect formation. 1, 2, 1, 2. Perfect formation. They march into the airport. The airport's dead silent as the North Koreans march in. It's dead silent. We're all just in shock to see the North Koreans have arrived on their own special airplane. The North Koreans have arrived in the airport. You could hear a pin drop as they march in perfect formation. Like perfect formation. And then one person, don't know who, wasn't near me, starts to applaud. And then another person starts to applaud. As the North Koreans are marching through this airport, I'm standing there in a crowd of thousands and thousands of people. We're cheering for the North Koreans, applauding for the North Koreans. And that is a moment in my life I will never forget. Whole airport of people, thousands of people cheering for a country that we've been told to hate all our lives. Cheering for a country that's been subjected to so many sanctions and bombings and attacks and subversions. Cheering for a country that's forbidden, a country that's designated as evil, a country that the U.S. has done everything it can to get us to hate, to destroy, to have a war with, to attack and invade. But I was there in a room full of people. Not just one or two people, not just a couple hundred people. I was in a room full of thousands of people in this airport, applauding for the North Koreans, cheering for the North Koreans, treating them as heroes. And that's a moment I will never forget. And you know what? Maybe there was a lot of people there who wouldn't agree with me. Maybe there were a lot of communist atheists in that room, but I would say that God was in the room with us that day. God was in the room with us that day. Because the power, the spiritual power I felt in that room was explosive. And I felt like this is where I belong. These are my people. This is where I belong. This is the movement that I'm loyal to. We're going to bring imperialism down. We're going to bring down the system that puts profits over people. We are going to bring down the forces of greed and war and empire. We are going to bring down. We are going to bring down the forces of evil that dominate this world. And North Korea and Russia and China and Venezuela and Iran and the working class of America are going to rise. And imperialism will be destroyed. Imperialism will be destroyed. Imperialism will be destroyed. Imperialism will be destroyed. We will be victorious. We will win. Because we love humanity. And we love justice. And we love truth. And we believe in what we're doing. And we're connected to something that is eternal. Something that will not fade away. Something solid that will not melt into air. Something that transcends the darkness and the hopelessness that one can often find in this world. And you can laugh at that all you want. And you can call that foolish. And you can call that naive. And you can call that ignorant. And you can call it not scientific. And you can call that superstition. You can call that childish. But I know why the people of Yemen haven't surrendered. And I know why the people of Lugansk and Donetsk have kept fighting. And I know why the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela is still intact. I know why Mumia Abu Jamal is still alive, even though they tried to kill him. They wanted him dead. I know that there is more to this world than just material reality. And I know that I'm on the winning team. And that I've attached myself to the forces of truth and justice, and that even if I fade away, even if they kill me tomorrow, even if I fade into nothing, even if my name is forgotten and buried by history, I will have meaning. And I will mean something as a person because I attached myself. I have attached myself to the forces of truth and justice and light. And I don't need your permission to believe this. And I don't need your approval to believe this. And I don't need you to understand it. It works for me. It's gotten me this far. So I'll take it. And that's my message for you tonight. That's my message for you all tonight. Pretty off the cuff, pretty random. That's what I felt like saying. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. And yeah, why don't we do the roll call? I see we've got some super chat questions that have come in. Why don't we do the roll call? And I did want to mention, it's getting towards the end of the month, and I always do a patrons only stream at the beginning of every month. On the first of every month, I do a patrons only stream. The first of the month is Friday. So on Friday, at some point on Friday, I am going to do a patrons only stream, and I am trying to rebuild my Patreon. So if you like what I have to say and you want to support us, right? And you don't want to join CPI, or you do want to join CPI, this is another way you can help out. I would appreciate it if you signed up on the Patreon. If you join the Patreon, you get all the books for free. You get all the books sent to you for free. So you'll get a new copy. You'll get a copy of the Bob book as long as you send me your address once you sign up on the Patreon. So that's an option you all have. We are going to have a patrons only stream on Friday, which is the first of the month. The first of the month, we always have a patrons only stream. So I am just letting people know they have this option. I do need Patreon supporters. Helps me get through things. Just wanted to get that out there. We could use the support. It is one way to keep things going. I don't get rich off Patreon. You can look at the numbers. I'm not making a huge amount of money off of that, but it's one way of paying my bills. But anyhow, names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. We got Mark in Utica, New York. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Mariah says, but let justice roll down the waters and righteousness flow like an ever-flowing stream. Bendigo, Australia, David Fox. Colin in Greensboro. Juan in Quito, Ecuador. Jenny in Cincinnati. John McCarthy in Chicago. Dustin Schlesinger in Cleveland, Ohio. Victory Gin in New Mexico. We got Jorge Ruiz. Welcome, Jorge. We got Tony in Tasmania. We got Carl in Washington. Patrick in Maine. Brendan on the couch. Edwin in the Philippines. Sarah in Canada, our home and native land, high level Alberta, Canada, Todd Mead. All right. David's in Bermuda, Jamie in St. Paul. There we go. Denver in Minnesota, Briggy in Pennsylvania. Shout out to Briggy. She's doing great stuff. Great morning messages as always. As always, names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. All righty. Names and locations. All right. We got Anthony in Detroit. Welcome, 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 Anthony. So glad to have you with us. Anyone on the Rumble? No, I don't see anyone on the Rumble giving me names and locations. But if you do, I'll call it out. Oh, Mariah says, you're on fire tonight. Well done. I'm not a communist. In my opinion, a utopia isn't possible because we have a fallen world. But I'm here as an anti-imperialist and a Christian. Interesting. All right. I'll definitely react. I do the Rumble rants first. So thank you, Mariah. Thank you, Mariah. So there we go. There we go. Names and locations, folks. Names. Gabby in Chicago. Gabby is great. Anthony in Detroit. On the Rockfin, we got anyone on the Rockfin? I see Victory Gin is also on the Rockfin. Says, hey, winners. Very, very good. Very, very good. Chris in Salt Lake City. Welcome, Chris, out in Salt Lake City. Welcome, 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 Chris. So glad to have you here with us tonight. So glad to have you here, Chris in Salt Lake City. Welcome, 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 welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to have you here. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Always good to find out who's on the other side of the camera. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. All right. Well, folks, I would appreciate it if you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. YouTube is being unbelievable and suppressing me in the algorithms like you wouldn't believe. But I also, I've got a few super chats here to answer. We do Rumble rants first and then Rockfin tips and then super chats. We got a decent number of questions to answer, but if you got something you want me to talk about in the second half of our show, by all means, send the question in, right? Because got to make it substantive, got to make it something to talk about. Maddie in California, Ryan in Long Island, Dave Incognito, bump. That's a joke. Good to have you here. So yeah, if you got something you want me to talk about in the second half of our program, send in your question. Always good to have questions to react to talk about. Mitchell Sparks in Pittsburgh, welcome. So now I am going to play a little bit of music. There's a communist group called the Progressive Labor Party. And they recorded some music in the 1970s. And their music is enjoyable. Let me just put it that way. Their music is enjoyable. It's a little hokey, but it's enjoyable. I've always enjoyed their music. So I got a couple songs from the Progressive Labor Party I'm going to put on. This one's called, it's an anti-drug song called Politicians and Pushers, a communist anti-drug song. Here we go.
Shove it back down their throats. Politicians and pushes and police and peddlers and smugglers.
That was a good one. And I'm going to play another Progressive Labor Party song. This one is, the U.S. government declared that South Africa, that was their ally. And they called Nelson Mandela a terrorist. But it was the Soviet Union that armed Nelson Mandela and the people of South Africa to fight apartheid. And that, anti-apartheid, protesting apartheid in South Africa for the rights of the black people used to be a communist cause. And so the Progressive Labor Party, communists, they wrote this song, South Africa Means Fight Back. So there you go.
There are thousands of rebels fighting for their lives. The world is watching closely as the youth and workers rise. The silent night is shattered, the stormy winds do rage.
Apartheid rules South Africa, the struggle mounts again. South Africa means fight back. This is what we say. South Africa means fight back, my friends, and fight back means today.
Now they have to be prepared, of this you may be sure, to fight the armies of the state and their blazing guns of war.
Workers of all nations must support this fight. Struggle on to victory. To win we must unite.
South Africa means fight back. This is what we say. South Africa means fight back, my friends, and fight back means today.
The emperors in Johannesburg, they do not understand that the working class will not give up nor compromise their stand.
When the butchers grow impatient, they wave their diamond rings,
and death rides through South Africa, the people rise again. South Africa means fight back. This is what we say. South Africa means fight back, my friends, and fight back means today.
The end is not yet written, the song is not yet sung. How racist laws were put to flame and racist bosses hung. Of black and white together, of lives made whole at last,
of a communistic future, of a fascist system's past. South Africa means fight back. This is what we say. South Africa means fight back, my friends, and fight back means today. South Africa means fight back, fight back. This is what we say. South Africa means fight back, my friends, and fight back means today.
So I'm going to put on another song. This is the last song I'll play from the PLP. This is called They Shall Rule the Earth. What's interesting is, we had at our Chicago conference, we had a guy perform this, and Tara Reid remembered it because Tara Reid, when she was a teenager, her mother was in the Progressive Labor Party, which I didn't even realize. I didn't know that Tara Reid had a communist background, but I guess when she was a kid, her mom was in the Progressive Labor Party. And she mentioned that in her speech, that she had, as a kid, her mom had taken her to a lot of Progressive Labor Party events. So we'll put on They Shall Rule the Earth.
The men and women on the line, they're working overtime, sweating for a dime. Their labor's stolen from them, and they're not paid what it's worth. Someday they shall rule the earth.
Here's to the tillers of all land, bending down and toil, harvesting the soil, working through the cold and heat, growing rice and wheat. Someday they shall rule the earth. The working women of all shores, working night and day, often for no pay. In your liberation, men too will find salvation. Someday they shall rule the earth.
As for the killers of our dreams, the fat cats with their schemes, their hungry war machines, the bankers and the businessmen, those noblemen from birth, someday we'll drive them from the earth.
This song is to the workers of the world. Our challenge has been hurled, our banners come unfurled.
Sisters, brothers, shed your chains, let the fight begin. We've got a socialist world, we've got a socialist world, we've got the whole wide world to win.
All righty. Okay. So now my policy on here is I've been answering Rumble rants first. And so I'll do the Rumble rants, and I see there's a couple more from Mariah, and I appreciate it. And then I'll do the super chats. And I guess there's no Rockfin tips as of yet, and that's okay. So there we go. All right. I'm going to start answering questions. First question. Jamie Turner writes, Trumpism proves that Americans are still capable of a mass movement, despite the ruling class's efforts to atomize the people. Well, look, this is what's happened in the past with Trumpism, and still it is happening to some degree. There's a lot of people who really want to rise up. And, you know, every so often something breaks through. You know, you can rise up every day if you want. I mean, there's protests happening all the time. But every so often something breaks through the mainstream where people see that there's an opportunity to rise up, right? Occupy Wall Street. They showed it on MSNBC. They showed it on CNN. And thousands and thousands of people came to it because they were just looking. They were just waiting for somebody to tell them where they could join a revolution. They wanted a revolution. They wanted a mass movement to join. And they turned on TV, and there was Occupy Wall Street, so they joined it. And that's what's happening with Trump. There's millions of Americans that hate the FBI, that hate the CIA, that hate the wars. And Donald Trump his message has widely gone out there that he's against the elites, you know? And so millions of Americans will show up. There are millions and millions of Americans who absolutely want to join a revolutionary movement. Donald Trump is not a revolutionary. You know, Donald Trump is a demagogue. He's a little bit of a Bonapartist. To some degree or other, I support him against the establishment, but he was an awful president. His presidency was horrible. I mean, he did a lot of awful things as president. He murdered Qasem Soleimani. He did his economic policies didn't benefit the working class. But, you know, to some degree or other, I can sympathize with Donald Trump and with the people who support him because of the fact that he's against the establishment. But he wasn't a good president. But there are millions of Americans who are looking for a place to revolt. And what you're getting at, Jamie, in your question is that whenever like the memo goes out, whenever something breaks through the establishment, this happened with the Tea Party, this happened with Black Lives Matter, there's a lot of Americans who just want to rebel and they don't know how. They don't know how. Well, we got to show it to them. We got to knock on their doors. We got to invite them to our conferences. We got to get them to watch these live streams. We got to show them that you can rebel. You can fight back. You can join a movement. We need a movement now more than anything, right? We don't need internet arguing and bickering. We don't need content consumption. We need a movement. We need a real movement to oppose the wars, to fight for socialism, to fight for anti-imperialism. We need a movement. We need people gathered together, standing arm in arm. We need people to stand and support the Uhuru movement. Uhuru has been indicted. You know, they're trying to put him in jail for feeding their people, for organizing farmers markets in the Black community, for providing services. We need a movement to stand in solidarity with Uhuru. We need a movement. We need a movement. We must build a movement. We need a movement right now. We need a in real life organization, and we're doing our best. We're doing our best to make it happen. We are doing our best to build a movement at the Center for Political Innovation. And that's why we've been targeted, and that's why we don't get to play. You know, if I was just on here, you know, cussing up a storm and putting on a show, I would get a lot more play. But I'm a threat because I'm attached to real anti-imperialist countries like Russia, like Iran, like Venezuela. And I'm also I'm building a real movement. I am the ruling class's worst nightmare. They're not afraid of somebody on there, you know, just making videos. They're not afraid of somebody on there just you know, grifting. They're afraid of a real movement. But millions of people need a real life movement, and I am the product of an in real life movement. I don't know how to stop. This is all I know how to do. This is how I have spent my entire adult life, as building a movement. I wouldn't be a reporter for RT if it wasn't for a movement. I wouldn't be alive right now if it wasn't for a movement. I wouldn't have a reason to be. I would never have met my wife if it wasn't for a movement. I'd never have come to New York City if it wasn't for a movement. My whole existence, all I know is a movement. So I can't stop being a movement guy. I can't stop building an organization. I can't stop organizing. As much as some people might want me to do that, I cannot do it. I don't know how. My entire being, my entire essence is wrapped up in a movement. And that's why when I see them target Uhuru, that is so dangerous. There should be thousands and thousands of people in the streets right now supporting Uhuru, right? Because we need a real movement. Rage Against the War Machine should have been 100 times bigger than it was. There should have been 100,000 people at Rage Against the War Machine. And, you know, we need a movement right now. We need a movement. I'm on here talking, and I mean, I'd rather be doing this than doing nothing, but we need a movement. We need to build a movement. We need a movement. We urgently need a movement. So there we go. I think you got the point. What I'm saying is we need a movement. But anyway, so then the next Rumble rant, it says, "This is Mariah. You're on fire tonight. Well done. I'm not a communist. In my opinion, utopia isn't possible because we live in a fallen world. But I'm here because I'm an anti-imperialist and a Christian." Well, you know, utopia is some great ideal that is based on morality. What we're saying is possible is that the level of development could reach the level that hierarchies could be broken down, just like we don't have feudalism anymore, just like we don't have slavery anymore, just like we don't have hunter-gatherer civilization anymore. We're not talking about some kind of, you know, ideal utopia. We're talking about what is materially possible based on a level of economic development. And we could, as human beings, I'm very confident that we could invent and advance technology to the point that people don't have to work anymore, that labor becomes life's prime want. I'm confident of that. I am confident that we could build a society where everyone has enough. And I'm confident of that. I don't doubt that. Right. You know, we're not talking about some unachievable thing. Right. You know, utopian socialism is a socialism that appeals simply to people's morality. But Marxism, as an economic system, argues that based on a level of economic development, we can transcend the current order and get to an order that would have a much more egalitarian way of being based on vast abundance. That's That's what we are arguing. But, I respect your right to not be a communist. If you don't want to look, calling yourself a communist now doesn't have any meaning, right? I'll be honest with you, right? I mean, it used to be I would always tell people I was a communist because I wanted to tell them what it was. But now when I tell people I'm a communist, they don't want to know what a communist is because they assume that means I'm a transgender teenager who thinks that all Republicans are Nazis and should be shot. And I don't want people to think I'm that because I ain't that. So I almost don't tell people I'm a communist. And in fact, when I meet somebody, if they tell me they're a Trump supporter, I feel safer around them because it means they're more open to anti-establishment views about Russia, about the FBI, about tech censorship, etc. So things have really changed. I haven't changed. The script, the narrative, the understanding of the world hasn't changed. But a lot of things, that was the point of my opening remarks tonight. A lot of things have changed, right? So the word communist, it had one meaning during the Cold War. It doesn't have that meaning anymore. We got to figure out different ways to promote this, right? The Center for Political Innovation, our name doesn't say communist in it, right? Because we're innovators. We're not trying to repeat the Cold War. We're not trying to just be a new version of the Communist Party USA. We're trying to innovate, to find a formula that will work in our time. So our name, CPI, Center for Political Innovation, the city building tendency. That's innovate. That's a new thing, right? And we're building something new. The foundations, the principles are the same, but the application is new. We should be constantly reinventing ourselves in order to win and be more effective. So I'm with you there. No one says you have to call yourself a communist because that wouldn't mean the same thing. So there you go. And when people are against communism, it usually means they're against Joe Biden. I'm against Joe Biden. But Joe Biden's not a communist in the way that Stalin was. He's not a communist in the way Mao is or was, but they don't understand that. But I'm with them being against Joe Biden, even though, they call him a word that I understand the complicated history of. We shouldn't get caught up in semantics. So there you go. Also, you're one of the few anti-imperialists who is not hostile to Christianity, which is refreshing. Well, look, I learned in the Gulf of Aden, it took me going all the way to the Gulf of Aden on a ship to Yemen to realize that Jesus is what it's all about for me. It took me a long time to realize that. And it took me years. I mean, I was there and I realized that the only reason I was on that ship was because I learned about Jesus when I was a kid and that I was a Christian before I became a communist. I became a communist because I wanted to realize Christian ideals. I gave myself to Jesus Christ when I was a child, right? I learned about Jesus and I learned about the crucifixion and the resurrection, and I learned about his message of kindness and love and brotherhood and forgiveness. And I took that in and I really believed it. And then I saw a society that was preaching Christianity constantly that wasn't living up to it. And I turned to communism because I wanted what Christianity was claiming to offer, and I didn't see it. And it took me going all the way to Iran and the Gulf of Aden to realize that I'm a Christian and that my communism is just a way to enact my Christianity, right? And it took me a long time to realize that. And that why I was unhappy with the boomer communists I was with is that it wasn't that for them. That some of these people, they became communists because they wanted to be bad. They wanted to be bad, Some of the leaders of the Workers' World Party, they became communists because they wanted to be the enemy. They wanted to be edgy. They wanted to break things. They wanted to break the rules and be naughty, Whereas I became a communist because I wanted to be good. I wanted to stand for truth and justice. I wanted to do what was right. I wanted to love my fellow human beings. I wanted to have compassion for those that are having hardship in life. I became a communist because I wanted to be good. And so I wasn't fitting in with a bunch of boomers who became communists because they wanted to be bad. They wanted to be drug users. They wanted to be weathermen and blow shit up. I didn't fit in with them. They became communists because they were pessimistic and cynical and they wanted to be bad. And I became a communist because I wanted to be good and moral, and I wanted to have Jesus' love in my heart. And, there's one thing I got to say, right? And this is an interesting thing. But think about what you're putting out there. And not in terms of what you're preaching, right? Because, if you're watching this, right, we're preaching anti-imperialism. We're telling people the truth. But are you putting it out there with positive energy or negative energy? Are you putting it out there in an optimistic way or in a negative way, right? You should light up a room when you walk into it. People should feel hope and happiness when they approach you. They should feel love and kindness when they approach you. Right? They shouldn't feel hate. They shouldn't feel darkness. They shouldn't feel cynicism. They shouldn't feel a need to harm other people or rage. They shouldn't see that. When people see you, they should feel hope. They should feel happiness. They should feel love when they see you. Right? Let your light shine before the world and let people see that what we're about as anti-imperialists and socialists is about love and kindness. I can do that. You're on the list. I will do it when I get to it. Never thought I'd get a request like that. You must be an old-time fan. You must be an old-time fan. Chaotic Crab, you must be an old-time fan to know about that. That's some of my early stuff, right? That's some of my early stuff when I was still playing the Borscht Belt. I'm joking, but there you go, Chaotic Crab. You're on the list, and I will do that. This guy knows my material. This is an old-time fan. So there you go. There you go. He knows the shirt. He knows the shirt and where it's been before. Wild times. All righty. So there you go. And thank you, Mariah. Thank you very much, Mariah. I'm glad you're joining the Patreon. There you go. All righty. So now I'm going to start answering super chats. Your coworkers are class conscious, but they hate China. They hate China because they think China is the reason they're losing their jobs. China is the reason their relatives are dying from opioids. You got to prove them wrong. You got to say their relatives are dying from opioids because of big pharma. Their relatives are dying from opioids because of a society that is decaying and corporations that push doctors to overprescribe the medications and a lack of economic opportunity and the stress that people are facing. One of the main reasons people become opioid addicts is because opium and opioids, takes away stress, and the stress of being a working class person and being part of this precariat, surviving in a gig economy where you're constantly trying to add up enough at the end of the month to pay your bills, right? That precarious existence that defines the life of the working class in our time is highly stressful. And opioids are something people turn to in order to avoid that stress. And it's very sad. It's very, very sad. It's very sad. And so, the thing about the fentanyl, right, is fentanyl is a synthetic creation. It's not a drug from the ground. It's certain pharmaceutical chemicals. Are some of those chemicals made in China? Yes, but they have other purposes, right? And people may get them from China, but they stir it up into fentanyl here in the United States, right? They're always finding fentanyl labs. So China is not responsible for the fentanyl. It is not responsible for the fentanyl. But on top of that, you need to show them examples of the Chinese government kicking the ass of corporations and building their people up and say, look, in China, they decided they were going to wipe out extreme poverty, and they did it. We declare war on poor people in this country. We declare war on people's privacy in this country. We declare war on Libya and war on Iraq. In China, they declared war on poverty. In China, they're building high-speed railways. In China, they're paving their roads in the most remote areas while we're unpaving our roads. We got to show them that if you're class conscious, you should love what China has, because China has a government of action that kicks ass and is fighting for working families. That's what you got to show them. And that's the problem there, is that they think that China is their enemy, and that China is responsible for their hardships. And they don't understand that China is the solution. A government of action, a government that feels an obligation to serve the people. That's the slogan of the Chinese government: serve the people. That's the solution. So there you go. There you go. All right. What are the worst crimes of Kissinger and Brzezinski? Well, Henry Kissinger is tied to that horrendous coup that happened in Chile, right? Henry Kissinger is also tied in with the Vietnam War and the mass bombing of Vietnam. He was part of the Nixon administration, Operation Rolling Thunder, that killed millions of people in Vietnam. Kissinger was largely responsible, and he's loved in China because of the fact that he arranged for the United States to normalize diplomatic relations with China, which was not a popular thing, right? And my new book that just came out reveals different forces that were working against it, and how some certain communist groups got kind of manipulated and duped during those years and used by other forces to work against diplomatic relations with China. That's one of the big revelations in my book, and I brought receipts. I show it. But That's Henry Kissinger, and he's widely loved in China. But yes, he's tied to the coup in Chile. He's tied to the slaughter of the Vietnamese people. He's tied to a lot of right-wing movements in Latin America that were anti-communist. He's tied to nuclear escalation. So yeah, Henry Kissinger. Now, Brzezinski is largely responsible for the overthrow of socialism in Eastern Europe and cultivating the forces, the color revolutions, the Polish, driving a wedge between Poland and the Soviet Union, Romania and the Soviet Union, the color revolutions that happened. Brzezinski is also responsible for mobilizing Muslims of the world and creating Islamic terrorism. There would not be an Al-Qaeda if it wasn't for Brzezinski. There would not be there wouldn't be an ISIS if it wasn't for Brzezinski. He's responsible largely for, creating Islamic extremism and using Saudi Arabia to channel money to create whole networks of jihadists, right? You can blame 9/11 on Brzezinski. You can blame all kinds of Islamic terrorism on Brzezinski because he worked really, really hard to cultivate Wahhabi extremists around the world to do the bidding of the United States. So that's Brzezinski. So there you go. Plus the overthrow of socialism in Eastern Europe. All right. Thank you, Austin. And thank you, Victory Gin. Can we invest in BRICS yet? What's the deal with that? Well, BRICS is starting a bank, right? That's the big development, right? They haven't launched a currency yet. They're planning to, but they're launching a development bank so that if a country wants to raise its people up and if, developing countries want to continue to raise their people up out of poverty, they don't have to go to the IMF and the World Bank, the Bretton Woods institutions. They can now join the BRICS Bank. This is a development bank. And the BRICS Bank won't participate in sanctions on any of its members. Iran is a member. So the BRICS Bank, it ain't doing anything with sanctions on Iran. The BRICS Bank is not doing sanctions on Russia, not doing sanctions on China. And the BRICS Bank is a development bank. That's the big breakthrough that's going on. But yeah, they want to create a currency. And they're talking about making an alternative to the SWIFT system, right? The SWIFT system, that's the main way bank transfers happen globally. When the USA doesn't like a country, they kick them out of the SWIFT system, like they've done to Iran, like they've done to Venezuela. Well, BRICS is saying we're going to have our own bank transfer system that won't be controlled by the United States. That's what BRICS is about. There you go. And, BRICS, it is the anti-imperialist bloc, Russia and China, Iran, but it's also countries that are more neutral, like India, like South Africa, so Brazil, that's important as well. So there you go. All right. And thank you, Austin. Much appreciated. And this is what inspired Norman Bethune to join Mao in China. Go and read. I will put the link in the chat. The speech Mao gave at the funeral of Dr. Norman Bethune, right? It is one of the most beautiful speeches about feeling a duty in memory of Norman Bethune by Mao Zedong, right? How long is it? It's not that long, so I'm going to read the whole thing. I'm going to read December 21st, 1939. Mao gave this speech, this very brief speech at the funeral of Dr. Norman Bethune. And it's short, so I am going to read it to you because it's important. It is goddamn important. We should all be reading this, right? We should all know this. So there we go. This is Mao, 1939, December 21st. Comrade Norman Bethune, a member of the Communist Party of Canada, was around 50 when he was sent by the Communist Party of Canada and the United States to China. He made light of traveling thousands of miles to help us in our war of resistance against Japan. He arrived in Yunnan in the spring of last year. He went to work in the Wutai Mountains, and to our great sorrow, he died a martyr at his post. What kind of spirit is this that makes a foreigner selflessly adopt the cause of the Chinese people's liberation as his own? It is the spirit of internationalism. It is the spirit of communism from which every Chinese communist must learn. Leninism teaches that the world revolution can only succeed if the proletariat in the capitalist countries supports the liberation of the colonial and semi-colonial peoples. And if the proletariat of the colonies and semi-colonies supports the liberation of the proletariat in the capitalist countries. Comrade Bethune put this Leninist line into practice. We Chinese communists must also follow this line in our practice. We must unite with the proletariat of all the capitalist countries, with the proletariat of Japan, of Britain, the United States, Germany, Italy, and all the other capitalist countries. For this is the only way to overthrow imperialism, to liberate our nation, and to liberate the people of the other nations and the people of the world. This is our internationalism, the internationalism with which we oppose both narrow nationalism and narrow patriotism. Comrade Bethune's spirit, his utter devotion to others, without any thought of self, was shown in his great sense of responsibility and in his work and in his great warm-heartedness toward all the comrades and the people. And every communist must learn from him. There are not a few people who are irresponsible in their work, preferring the light and shirking the heavy, passing the burdensome tasks on to others and choosing the easy ones for themselves. At every turn, they think of themselves before others. When they make small contributions, they swell with pride and brag about it for fear that others will not know. They feel no warmth toward comrades and people, but are cold and indifferent and apathetic. In truth, such people are not communists and are not, at least, cannot be counted as devoted communists. No one who returned from the front failed to express admiration for Bethune wherever his name was mentioned, and none remained unmoved by his spirit. In the Shansai Chahar Hopi border area, no soldier or civilian was unmoved who had been treated by Dr. Bethune or had seen how he worked. And every communist must learn this true spirit from Comrade Bethune. Comrade Bethune was a doctor. The art of healing was his profession, and he was constantly perfecting his skills, which stood very high in the 8th Route Army Medical Service. His example is an excellent lesson for those people who wish to change their work the moment they see something different, and for those who despise technical work as of no consequence or promising no future. Comrade Bethune and I met only once. Afterwards, he wrote me many letters. But I was busy, and I wrote him only one letter, and I do not even know if it was ever received. I am deeply grieved over his death, and now that we are commemorating him, which shows how profoundly his spirit inspires everyone, we must all learn the spirit of absolute selflessness from him. And with this spirit, everyone can be useful to the people. A man's ability may be great or small, but if he has this spirit, if he is already noble-minded and pure, a man of moral integrity and above vulgar interests, a man is of value to the people. And that is the speech that Mao gave at the funeral of Dr. Norman Bethune. And it's been years since I've read it. And I was so deeply moved by the opening because I was having an argument with somebody today who was telling me that, it's hopeless. The people of the United States, they're all too bought off by the imperialists and they are the oppressors and they're the exploiters. Right there, he's saying that it is our duty to align with the people of the world in their struggle for national liberation. And he's saying, do you know how deep this is, right? We don't know how deep this is. He says, we Chinese communists must follow their practice. We must unite the proletariat of all capitalist countries, right? He's saying the Chinese people must unite with the proletariat of all capitalist countries, with the proletariat of Japan. He's telling the Chinese communists that they must unite with the workers of Japan. Do you know how many people Japan murdered in China? But he's telling the Chinese communists, we've got to unite with the proletariat of Japan. The workers of Japan are not our enemies. With the workers of Britain, the United States, Germany, and Italy, and all capitalist countries. For this is the only way to overthrow imperialism. That this first paragraph here, that is what my whole life has been about. We have got to unite the working class of America with the colonized people of the world. The workers of America must stand with China, must stand with Russia, must stand with Iran and Venezuela and Cuba. That is what our job is. We have got to get the working class of the Western countries to stand arm in arm with the people of the world. That is the essence of our mission. That is the essence of our mission. And if you're not doing that, you're not getting it. And that whole first paragraph right there, I was just so deeply moved. I got very emotional reading it because I didn't expect that. I expected him to talk about Bethune's selflessness, but he's right there bringing down the hammer that the fact that a Canadian communist unified with the Chinese communists, that is the essence of our mission, because we're about bringing the working class, thank you, Victory Jen, the working class of the imperialist countries into solidarity with the working class of the colonized world, right? And anyone who calls themselves a communist and is talking about Chinese imperialism right now, or talking about Russian imperialism right now, needs to shut the fuck up, right? Anyone who calls themselves a communist should be screaming from the heavens that the Russians are our friends, the Chinese are our friends, the Iranians and the Cubans and the Venezuelans are our friends, and Wall Street and the Pentagon are our enemies. And that if you're truly patriotic to the United States, then you should be an internationalist and you should reject the imperialists. This is Marxism, and it's not woke and it's not trendy and it's not hip. But this is what it's all about. And I'm also moved. Because, I've been thinking so much about Jesus, and I've been listening to a lot of sermons and going to church. And he talks about living for the sake of others. To live for the sake of others. That's the essence of Jesus's message. And right here, Mao is saying we've got to live for the sake of others. He puts it into exactly the same words, right? To live selflessly and in service of others. Wow. I am just so moved. I wish that every communist in the world could read the speech of Dr. Mormon Bethune, could read this speech. I wish I'd quoted it in my Bob Avakian book. I quoted something else. I quoted Long Live Leninism. But I wish every communist could read those 4 paragraphs. It's a 4-paragraph speech I just read you. Could read those 4 paragraphs and really understand them. That we have got to stand in solidarity. The workers in the imperialist countries must stand in solidarity with the workers in the oppressed countries and with the national liberation struggles, and that we should live for the sake of others. Gavin, a member of CPI, who's an evangelical, he's a fundamentalist Christian, and no other communist group would ever allow Gavin to join because he's so against abortion, so against homosexuality. But we welcome him with open arms because we know there's a lot of working class people just like Gavin. And we're not here to change his religion. We're not here to change his religious views, right? They kicked him out of DSA because he shared a meme on his Facebook criticizing Planned Parenthood. He's got views on a lot of things that are pretty conservative, but he's a communist and he loves Gaddafi and he loves Russia and China. So we welcome him into our group. And he recited a poem, a beautiful poem at our retreat about others. He recited the hymn, the lyrics to the hymn "Others," right? About. It was beautiful, right? To live for the sake of others. That was just such a moving speech that Mao gave. This is a wild night, folks. This has been a wild ride. Thanks for riding with me. Tomorrow night, I hope I'm on a different mood. This has been a strange night, but I'm glad you're all along for the ride, right? You know who you're dealing with. In fact, the next super chat I've got here, Chaotic Crab really knows who he's dealing with. He knows some classic work that I've got. So this is an interview I gave long before I worked at RT, when I was just a guest on RT. This is an interview I gave on the 90th anniversary of the death of Vladimir Lenin. right? Lenin died in 1924, and this is an interview I gave in 2014 about the legacy of Lenin. And it got a lot of views on the internet. It was crazy. I was a member of the Workers' World Party at the time I gave this interview. They wanted Larry Holmes, the leader of the Workers' World Party, to give the interview, and he wouldn't do it. What kind of chairman? What kind of, he was the first secretary, the first secretary of the Workers' World Party, and what kind of chairman won't give an interview about Lenin, on the anniversary of Lenin's death? You want to talk about an incompetent fool, not worthy of the job. They wouldn't interview Larry Holmes. They wanted Sarah Flounders, and Sarah Flounders was on vacation. So they got me instead. And they got Caleb Maupin, and I wore my Fidel Castro t-shirt, and I gave this interview. And I wore the same t-shirt I'm wearing right now, and I gave this interview on the death of Lenin. Now, I will say that I have gotten a lot better at speaking since then. So this is, I think that I've improved, right? And the way I frame things up in this interview, is not the way I would necessarily frame things now. This is in 2014, but it was a request, a blast from the past, from Chaotic Crab. He wanted to see this classic interview where I'm wearing the same t-shirt I'm wearing now. I haven't changed, folks. So, all right, let's do it. Let's put it on. This classic interview that I gave way back when. All righty. On the 90th anniversary of Lenin's death, I gave this interview. We had a special super chat request for me to show this interview. So here we go. I'm just waiting for it to load here. Hold on. Hold your horses. Just waiting for the interview to load, and we'll bring it in. Oh, here we go. All right. Here we go.
Is long gone, as well as his brainchild, the USSR, but his ideas are still floating around the world. How have attitudes towards his brand of communism changed since the fall of the Soviet Union?
Well, I would say that since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the capitalists of the world have only become more vicious. There have only been more wars, more unemployment, more privatizations, more cutbacks. And we need to recognize that part of the reason that workers, even in the United States, have things like Social Security, food stamps, unemployment insurance, that these things came as a result of the Soviet Union. That the capitalist powers of the United States were forced to give concessions because the Soviet Union existed and it was in competition. So we're really seeing the austerity that continues all across Europe right now and across the Western world as a result of the collapse of the Soviet Union. Labor unions have been weakened. All the people around the world struggling for national liberation from domination by Western banks and corporations no longer have the Soviet Union to come to their aid as they once did. So I think the collapse of the Soviet Union was a setback for the progressive forces in the world.
But as an economic project, the Soviet Union was a disaster, wasn't it? It collapsed eventually.
Oh, I don't accept that at all. In the 1930s, when the rest of the world was having a Great Depression, the Soviet Union was booming. The Soviet Union saved us from fascism and from Hitler, and it was the Soviet Union, the first society ever to conquer outer space. Huge, amazing things were done. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, that was at a time where they were having market reforms. Leaders like Gorbachev were privatizing things and all of that. If you go to any formerly socialist country in Eastern Europe, people will tell you that they would rather have socialism back. All the polls are showing that. The life expectancy has gone down. Education, things, all basic measures of societal health. Capitalism has made things far worse all across the world. Women in Eastern Europe under socialism had 2 years paid maternity leave, guaranteed jobs and education. But now under capitalism, the free market hasn't brought in freedom to Eastern Europe. It's brought in sex trafficking, poverty, drug addiction. Capitalism has been a disaster all over the world, and people are overwhelmingly seeing that. The Soviet Union never had a moment of peace. The capitalists of the world never gave it a moment to develop and fully blossom. It was always under attack, under threat. But even despite of that, so many great things were achieved. The Soviet Union was really proof that we don't have to have capitalism. We don't need the rich. They tell us that the rich are job creators. But in the Soviet Union, there were no rich, there were no bosses, there were no bankers, but every single person had a job. Every person was employed. So, the Soviet Union was living proof that we don't need the horrors of unemployment and poverty that we have in the modern world.
So anti-capitalist movements like Occupy Wall Street, which we've seen in the US, does that sort of movement form part of the legacy of Marx and Lenin then?
I would absolutely say so. All across the U.S. there are uprisings going on against capitalism. There was Occupy Wall Street. There were the youth who took to the streets against the brutal racist murder of Trayvon Martin. There are fast food workers organizing right now, and they're all fighting against capitalism and what Lenin described as capitalism in its monopoly stage, or imperialism, where a small group of bankers dominate the world economy and colonize and subjugate the peoples of the world. And if we truly want to win our freedom, the people in the Western countries, the working class, need to align with the people around the world that are struggling for national liberation and independence.
I haven't changed, folks. This was in 2014. This was almost 10 years ago. I haven't changed. And don't let anyone ever tell you I've changed.
And it was Lenin who had that brilliance and that understanding of what capitalism had developed into. Lenin really is an inspiration. But all throughout the history of the United States, all the people organizing for civil rights, all the most militant fighters in the labor movement, were all inspired by Marx and Lenin and by communism. And it was the Soviet Union that took a petition to the United States exposing the horrors of Jim Crow segregation. So many great things were done by the Soviet Union, despite the flaws that existed.
Yeah, and yet, of course, as I just mentioned earlier, the USSR collapsed, and of course, China's economic turn towards rampant capitalism and the complete isolation of North Korea. Surely those are examples that show that Leninism or communism is fundamentally unworkable in this modern age.
Well, I think if you look at Cuba today, Cuba has the highest life expectancy in all of Latin America. No Cubans are homeless, no Cubans are unemployed, but all over Latin America, in countries where the World Bank and the IMF and the free market policies have been implemented, people are starving and suffering. And I think the reality shows that socialism is the future. Capitalism is unsustainable. When you have a system based on profits, when you have a system where the more efficient things become, the more people are unemployed, where people are hungry not because there's not enough food, but because there's too much food causing overproduction and people are laid off, where people are homeless because there are too many houses, that's irrational. Capitalism is completely irrational. It's a system where a wealthy group of people in the pursuit of profits control the economy. And socialism is when the banks and the factories and the industries are in the hands of the people. And we have a planned economy, and it has been overwhelmingly successful. It's capitalism that's failing all over the world right now.
Many tourists go to Cuba, and they see that people live in cramped conditions, very poor living standards. People want free enterprise there. It's not as a rosier life as many enjoy in the West and other parts of the world.
Well, the Western countries, may have more wealth, but that's because of exploitation of the third world. But compared to other people throughout the third world, the Cubans live very well. And that's statistically provable. You can look at the CIA World Fact Book, which documents that Cubans have the highest life expectancy in Latin America, and you can look at United Nations statistics. In all basic standards of societal health, the Cubans live very well compared to other people in the third world. All the poorest countries of the world are capitalist. They're countries that have been dominated by Western banks and corporations. The U.S. bankers, the Western capitalist system impoverishes the people of the world. It lowers life expectancy, causes unemployment. But when countries have broken free of that system and developed an independent economic model, the result has been success. And the countries that have been building socialism have overwhelmingly been successful. And the reason China is so successful today is because the Chinese model is a model in which it's not just totally allowing the capitalists to do whatever they want. The Chinese Communist Party still holds a monopoly on political power, despite market mechanisms existing. So we need to keep this in perspective. Capitalism is creating poverty and suffering all over the world, and even in the Western countries. Unemployment, all these things that are just totally unnecessary. We don't need the rich. We simply don't need the rich. Working class people, we can run the economy. We can have an economy organized to meet human needs and not profit. It's there. The proof is there, and we need to realize this. We need to get beyond. In the United States, we're bombarded with all this propaganda. This idea that capitalism is some great system, but that's just false.
So tell me, why does the image of Lenin live on in the same way as Castro and Che Guevara? I see you're wearing that T-shirt today. They're brand images, aren't they?
Well, I think they've become popular and they've become exciting. They've become fashionable because people even though they may not understand clearly the ideas of these leaders, they do have an understanding of what these leaders stood for. They stood for world revolution. They stood for revolting. They stood for standing up and fighting back against oppression. And people want to do that. When people live in a society where there's police everywhere, where there's mass unemployment, where there's poverty, they want to look for an alternative. They want to fight back against hostile conditions. And I think people understand that Lenin, that Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, Kim Il-sung, Mao Zedong, they represent a resistance. They represent a will to build a better world, a world outside of markets and profits and capitalism. They represent a desire to move beyond all of that. And the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 was the first time we really saw the capitalist state overturned and socialism begin to be created. And its results are just continuing every single day. Workers all over the world are fighting back. Strikes are going on. People are fighting against racism, against poverty, against national oppression, against colonialism. And when they do that, they take inspiration from the Soviet Union and from Lenin. Lenin, a leader who pioneered that struggle and developed it. And I think the impact of Lenin will go on for generations to come.
Caleb, brilliant as always. Great answers. You're a great talker. Thanks a lot. Great to have you on. Good to challenge you. Thank you very much.
So there you go. That was a request from a fan, blast from the past. It's wild to think all that's gone on. That was almost 10 years ago. But there you go. And thank you, Victory Gin, for the super chat. And Austin asks thoughts on the U.S. dollar. Well, look, the crash of the U.S. dollar is coming. It may be gradual. It may be a gradual crash, or it may be very sudden. But the BRICS and de-dollarization is coming around the road. The petrodollar is a thing of the past at this point. What many people don't realize is the value of any currency is based on how widely it is used. And as a result of Joe Biden's actions and the isolation of Russia, the dollar is used less and less around the world. And we're seeing inflation. The value of the dollar is decreasing, but it's going to be a very, very, very dramatic decrease in the value of the dollar. And that's going to have an impact on our living standards. It's going to have an impact on our living standards for sure. So there you go. All right. Well, I don't want to talk shit about people, No one, I mean, that person is whatever, whatever. I don't want to talk shit about people. I probably shouldn't have said what I said, but that's okay. I mean, it's sad. I don't like burning bridges. I want to get along with people. And it disappoints me when people, you disagree with somebody, but you don't have to burn the bridge. I try not to burn bridges, but unfortunately, a lot of bridges have been burned at this point, and that's not what I strive to do. I'm a professional, and, if that person you mentioned was in the same room as me, we would be cordial to one another. And you have to do that, right? I mean, someone screws you over, someone, lies about you. If you're a professional, right? If you take this seriously, if you're a journalist or you're a serious political organizer, you got to share the stage with somebody who is an asshole, somebody who you've got an ugly past with, right? Your enemy today might be your friend tomorrow. Right. And that's just how you have to be. Right. And there may be somebody who mistreated you and screwed you or you had a nasty falling out with, and you got to be able to, share the stage with them tomorrow, enter an alliance with them tomorrow if it's what the working class needs. Look, the Communist Party and the Social Democrats, the communists of the world in the early 1930s and the Social Democrats were killing each other, shooting at each other in Germany and elsewhere. But then when fascism came on the scene, it became necessary to build a united front against fascism, and they flipped and they entered an alliance against fascism because it was the right thing to do. And Trotsky and others make fun of that, and they say, oh, look, they zig and zag. Well, that's how politics works. Sometimes you zig, sometimes you zag. You go back and forth because you put principles above it. There are Iranian communists I know who were tortured by the Islamic Republic when it came to power. But yet they understand that the Iranian Islamic Republic is fighting the imperialists. And so they still support it. That's a depth of politics that is very serious. And if you're a communist, it takes serious political understanding. You have to be serious about politics. You have to be serious. So, you have to put your own, vendettas and agendas. Look, that person you mentioned, whatever, I wish him the best. I hope he has a great retirement and, spends a lot of time with his grandchildren and, whatever, as politics makes strange bedfellows, and you got to be willing to forgive and forget, and you got to be willing to reconcile with people. You got to be willing to move past things, and you got to learn to have a thick skin, right? You got to learn that too. Someone might say something that just irks you, but you got to be able to say, you know what? My relationship with them is not about my feelings. It's about accomplishing what needs to be accomplished. So there you go. There you go. All right, folks. Wow, it's been a wild stream tonight. I'll be back tomorrow night. I assume I'll be back tomorrow night. So there you go. All right, I'm going to put on the closing music, and yeah, and I think we'll do this again soon, right? If folks want to sign up on Patreon, that would be great. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. So there you go. I haven't changed. In the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.